Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at a major event in the chess world, and it is the German Bundesliga. Now, the 2024 to 2025 German Bundesliga runs September 28, 2024 to April 27, 2025. It is a 16-team round-robin event played over 7 weekends, 15 rounds, in venues around Germany. Now, each match is played on 8 boards. The time control is 100 minutes for 40 moves, followed by 50 minutes for the rest of the game with a 30-second increment from move 1. Now, this is actually a very interesting tournament because you see that it is played over 7 weekends in different venues around Germany. Now, in this tournament, there is a very special news, and that is on January 13, 2025, the world's #1 chess player, Magnus Carlsen, made his debut for the St. Pauli team in the German Bundesliga. And what a debut it was. Magnus, who recently got married on January 4th, didn't waste much time before jumping back into action. He even joked about how amazing last week had been, but Saturday's match in Hamburg marked his back-to-work moment. Now, here we see that this is the news that chess.com actually provided us, and the St. Pauli chess team, like their football counterpart, was newly promoted to the top league. Their start wasn't the best, with 3 losses and 1 draw in their first few rounds. But things took a turn when Magnus joined the lineup. And of course, they will definitely win more games. Of course, with Magnus in their team. And in Magnus's debut game, he faced Dutch player Max Warmerdam. Determined to play a proper game rather than just settling for an easy draw, Magnus delivered a brilliant win. He admitted that, however, that his tendency to play too quickly when his opponents are under time pressure is a habit that he has always, he is still working on to improve. He wants to play slower when his opponent is under time pressure, because when he has time, he should think more, and it is a habit that he is still working on. And Magnus was quite pleased with the game, saying everything went according to plan. He managed to get the kind of complex position, without trading many pieces, and then he went into a complex position and he converted it smoothly. Reflecting on the victory, he said it felt incredible to kick things off as a new chess player with a win. So today, let's dive into this game where Magnus had played against Max Warmerdam. But before we take a look at that game, we're going to quickly take a look at this news, this text that chess.com has provided us. So, here, Magnus Carlsen makes debut for St. Pauli. I am pleased to be part of the coolest brand in Germany, Carlsen said last May when it was announced that he'd play for St. Pauli's chess team. The soccer team based in the Hamburg district, which includes the Warmerdam, is, I'm not sure if I pronounced that right, but I guess it's that way, is known for its passionate fans and left-wing politics. Carlsen is a fan of the club, having watched the game into the Millantor Stadium in 2016, while his participation was made possible by financial support from freestyle chess founder Jan-Henrik Bochner and the Waisenhaus Chess Academy. It then took until the 3rd weekend of the season, rounds 5 and 6, for Carlsen to line up for the team. And blah, blah, blah. That meant his honeymoon after marrying Ella Victoria Maloney on January 4th had lasted less than a week, with Magnus telling WIM, Women's International Master, Fiona Steele Anthony, I've had a very, very nice last week, and today is kind of back to work. And blah, blah, blah. This is nothing special, important. Here we see that Magnus, he is now back into the team. Their first, versus SG Solingen, and Magnus led the team to a huge win. Now, I think the rest are not that important. We can even see Hikaru Nakamura doing his streaming here. And, well, he like explained this game, he commented this game, and today I am going to do a recap of this game too. So nonetheless, ending of all of these like topics, now let's jump into the game. So Magnus here is with the black pieces, playing against Grandmaster Max Warmerdam, who is from, I guess, okay, Netherlands, who is from Netherlands. And here, Warmerdam starts with c4, Magnus plays e5, g3, g6, d4, d6, knight f3, knight d7, knight c3, bishop g7. We have the modern defense, but then after bishop g2, knight f6, this turns into the English opening. Like here, if black plays something like knight e7, this will still like be the modern defense, like the main line. Knight e7 is possible because you can push f5 immediately, probably without the knight block hitting the f pawn, but instead knight g6 was played, which is more like a structure more related to the king's Indian defense. And here, white decided to play short castle, and short castle was played. Now this, of course, just turns exactly back into the king's Indian defense. Of course, besides short castle, there are also many other options like taking on d4, even playing c6, but this is not important at all. Short castle is fine, basically, and here queen c2 was played. Now, of course, Warmerdam, he can actually just play e4 to transfer back exactly to the king's Indian defense, where I think it's not that bad for white. But then probably after e4, things are going to get a bit aggressive. Magnus is definitely going to play some 98 f5 ideas in the future to push f5, and white is probably going to play d5, b4, and c5. Everything is related to the king's Indian defense here. Black is going to attack on the king's side, white is going to attack on the queen's side. But here, instead of playing e4, white decided to play queen c2, which is a move that is not very common. The idea here is to prevent e4 from pushing and probably supporting e4 on the next move, but like queen c2 is not the favorite move here. Rook e8 was played, still threatening to go e4, and here instead of playing e4, like white instead of playing e4 himself, he decided to just simply ignore black's e4 threat and played rook d1 here. Now this is very clear. White wants to open up on e5 on the next move because the rook is now eyeing up the queen. But it doesn't really matter here because black is not going to allow white to take on e5 to open up the d file, and of course here to play e4. Now actually e4 is a move that is kind of risky here. It makes sense, but a more calm move would be to take on d4 and then after knight takes d4, probably go knight c5. The position is kind of pretty much equalized. White has black has this e file and white has this d file. Position is pretty much close to equal, and both sides have the same material. It's like a more positional game. But instead of playing like e takes d4 or probably rook d1, probably c6 also makes sense. Here Magnus decided to play e4. Now he has to be careful because it is kind of hard for black to push d5 to defend the e4 pawn, and this e4 pawn could become really weak. For example, after knight g5, which wasn't played in the game, but after knight g5, black will need to sacrifice a pawn here with e3. But it's important that you do not take the pawn with the bishop because here, very importantly, black can take on e3, sacrifice the rook, but then has knight g4. And black is going to win back the material really fast because he is threatening to take on g5, also threatening knight e3, which is actually a fork. So black is actually sacrificing material at first, but then quickly winning it back. Knight g5, of course, is full of calculations. Here white needs to take with the f pawn. It's kind of risky for both sides, but I think in my opinion black is slightly more in a risky situation because now, for example, c6, white can play e4 here with a very strong center. Also bishop f4 coming to attack the d6 pawn. Also, white has this open f file, attack the f7 pawn. So I think at this point, white has more counterplay in the whole game. But however, in the game, Warmerdam, instead of playing knight g5, decided to play a more calm move, and he played knight e1, which also makes sense. At least now e3 is not working because white can just take with the bishop. But right now, there's no need for black to play e3. In the game, knight b6 was played. Well, Magnus says, okay, if you're attacking my e4 pawn, I'm going to attack your c4 pawn. And here, c5 was played. Now, actually, this is the first mistake in the whole game. Now, it's important that if you take on e4, there's knight takes e4, bishop takes e4. Now, black can just simply take on c4, because if you take back, you lose the bishop. And if you don't take, for example, you just go back with the bishop, then black now has d5 to defend this knight. And at some point, for example, like b3, you just simply move the knight back. The d5 pawn also blockades this g2 bishop, so everything is pretty much in control for black. But however, in the game, it's still playing like, well, knight e4 is not the best move. Bishop g5 is the best move, pinning the knight and the queen. Now, also threatening to take on e4. The main point is that here, if you take on c4, there's now knight d5. Instead of taking on e4, which kind of isn't good, because there's knight b6 back, and just takes. For example, if you take on c7 here, there's rook e2, basically. And if you, for example, go e4 here, well, actually now black can just go c6 to defend his own pawn as well, and it's a game on. Like, the position is again equal, white doesn't really have any counterplay, and that is why he should have played something like, I don't know, bishop g5, and here, instead of taking on e4, play knight d5, because now if you go back with knight b6, after takes, there's knight c7, and this is much better for white. But I guess in the game, this is not that easy to see, but in the game, Warmerdam, he played a move that is even not in the top 3 consideration of the engine. He played c5, which is just kind of too risky and not even close to the best move. Well, here, it's important that you don't take on c5 because, takes, you'll just fall for white's trap, and c6 is coming. And black is going to have a really hard time. After knight e4, this is a damaged pawn structure. This is just winning for white. But, of course, after c5, there's no need for Magnus to really just take on c5. He can actually just play anything else, like move the knight away. And in the game, he did that, and he played knight bd5, the best move. And here, c takes d6 was played. Now, after knight bd5, when I was watching Hikaru's live stream, he said here that after knight bd5, black is threatening a lot of things. Knight b4, also like e3 maybe. Like, white is not in a happy situation here, because white is somehow losing counterplay. If he takes on e4, there's after takes. You see there's now knight b4. And now, queen has to go back to b1 to defend the bishop, but then there's d5. And then after, for example, if you go back here, there's bishop f5, and you're in huge trouble. And if you go a3 here to attack the knight, there's now knight c6. Probably you go back, but you lose the d4 pawn. It's really messy, but in the end, black is better here. So, it's a very comfortable position for Magnus. He is now completely in his comfort zone, and white is struggling to handle it. In the game, Warmerdam played c takes d6. Magnus took with the queen. Of course, he can also take with the pawn here. It is up to him. Now, bishop g5 probably, and then take on c3, let's say. If you take with the pawn, there's d5 to fix the pawn structure. If you take with the queen, there's probably some, also d5 is possible. So, it's possible here to either take with the queen, take with the pawn, all makes sense. You can even take on c3 if you want. But in the game, queen d6 was played, which is not bad. And here, bishop g5 was played. Now, probably for white can just take on e4, and after takes. Here, knight b4 might seem a little bit annoying, but you just play queen b1, and now there are no d5 threats to kick this bishop away. f5 doesn't make sense because it will blockade this bishop. So this is completely fine, and white is going to play a3 on the next move to kick away this knight. It all basically makes sense. But in the game, instead of playing knight e4, Warmerdam decided to play bishop g5. Now trying to exchange off a few pieces, in the game Magnus started to go really aggressive and he pushed with e3. Now here, Warmerdam made another decisive mistake. What he should have played is actually, well, the best move is a move that is not easy to see. The best move here is knight d3 here, because if you take on f2, I can take back with a knight and defend every square. But the main problem is that after knight e3, what if, black just plays bishop f5 to pin the knight and the queen? This is something that is really annoying, and you have to see this queen b3 move, running away from this pin. And now if you take on d3, rook takes, now you'll have to take with the king here. Or if you want, you can also play king f1, use this pawn as a shelter, and keep your king in safety. At least now there are no knight e3 threats, probably h6, but well, h6 is not good here. But probably after knight c3, b takes, c3, and then knight e4. The position is really messy, but of course, black is much convenient to play because white has a really weak king, and black has much more counterplay than white does. But in the game, however, Warmerdam here, he played this really dubious move, f3. Now after knight takes c3, b takes c3, Magnus immediately found this best move with knight d5. He says, okay, I'm not going to allow you to take on f6 because two bishops versus knight and bishop in a not so open position, it is definitely going to be better for white. So I'm just going to move away my knight. Knight can put pressure on c3. Also, if you play c4 at some point, there's knight b4. This knight is really strong on d5, also defending e3. And what should white do? In the game, Warmerdam decided to play c4. But c4 just simply, here, knight b4 is possible, but h6 is even better, which was played in the game. h6, now c takes d5, h takes g5, and we run into a position where it is knight and bishop versus bishop and bishop. But the main difference is that now the position is slightly more opened. Black is going to take on d5 on the next move. g4 might be a threat at some point. This bishop is now open. This bishop is also open to this diagonal. d4 is really weak. Also, this g2 bishop is having some trouble here to develop, to go to an open diagonal. So it's really comfortable for black and really hard for white to play. In the game, rook c1 was played, attacking c7, bishop f5 attacking the queen, queen b3, rook b8 defending b7, and now queen c4. Here, I think probably white should just simply get this knight out, knight c2, knight b4, try to create some chaos, or knight a3, knight b5. Just get this knight out as quickly as possible. But, however, Warmerdam here decided to play queen c4 to keep on tickling the pawns. But then, simply here, Magnus just ignores it. And after f4, because if you take on c7 here, there's now queen takes d5. So, black is trading the c7 pawn for the d5 pawn, which is kind of good for black. Now, if you go f4, there's queen takes a2. Black is just gonna happily gobble up another pawn, threatening to gobble up another pawn on the next move, and this should be winning. And after rook b d8, f4 was played here, opening up the diagonal and using the bishop to defend d5, but simply, black can just take on f4. Sorry. And then queen c7. If you take on f4 here, black is just going to take on f4. And in the game, queen c7 was played. Here, Magnus ignores it and played f takes g3, which is not the best move. The better move is, a little bit tricky, but to play queen a6. Now, the queen is sliding to the queen side, but threatening a really deadly, threatening to take on e2 on the king side. So the queen is actually really tricky here. It seems like it is on the queen side, but then it is eyeing a very important pawn on the king side. And it's actually really hard for white to defend. Probably knight d3, but then after f takes g3, h takes g3, rook c8, it's just everything is just falling apart. White has this damaged pawn structure. Also, d4 is falling. The bishop is out at any time. It's just completely over. In the game, however, f takes g3 was played, and after queen d6, allowing white to get the queens off the board somehow gives white more surviving chances. Rook takes d6, h takes g3, rook a6, excellent found by Magnus, so attacking a2 basically. Bishop f3, I mean, there's no way for white to really defend the a2 pawn with rook a1, but there's just simply like rook a4. d4 is going to fall anyways. And if you go knight f3 here, there's rook c8. The rook is going to swing out. The rook is coming to c2. It's unstoppable. d6 doesn't do anything. Either rook c2 works or rook d8 to just gobble up this pawn. It's all over. And then here after bishop f3, bishop f8, not even taken on a2, although taken on a2 would have been the easiest way to win. But Magnus first of all decided to reroute and coordinate his bishop. Bishop f8, g4. Well, here probably the best try for white is to go rook c7, taking on a2, and then white will take on b7. But black just needs to start pushing this outside pass pawn. It's still kind of like losing for black. Sorry, not for black, for white. Here, if white tries to go d6, well, there's just simply bishop takes d6. Bishop d5 doesn't really work here, even though it is threatening bishop s7 and bishop a2 at the same time. But now there's this beautiful move, rook d2. If you take on f7, king f8, you don't have time to take on e8 because you lose d1. And if you don't take, you move the rook away, for example, there's now, well, the bishop is there. For example, you go rook a1, then there's rook e7. And basically rook e2 is coming, it's all over. But in the game, however, g4 was played, and then after bishop e4, this is basically all over now. Even though the advantage that Magnus has is not an entirely winning advantage, but I think with he is up about half an hour than his opponent, this is just enough for him to win. Here, Magnus still has 37 minutes left on the clock, and Warmerdam only has 1 minute left on the clock. And this is pretty much enough. Rook c7, rook a2, but this is all over, taking the pawns. Well, maybe here Magnus did play a few inaccuracies, but it doesn't really matter. In the end, he won with rook d2, king f3, and rook d1, realizing that no matter what, knight d3 here, there's rook takes d3 and e2 promotes. And if you play something like knight g2, well, there's just rook f1, you go there, there's bishop d6. This is basically all over. And here, after rook d1, Warmerdam resigned the game and Magnus won his game. The first game, I think, in 4 months, ever since the Olympiad, the first classical game that he had. So he won this game beautifully with an accuracy of 95.9. Warmerdam, he did make a few mistakes here, like c5 was too risky, and then f3, then it just led to disaster. But it doesn't matter. Magnus is showing that even though a week ago he is still on his honeymoon, but he can switch his status, not status, but he can switch really fast. Like yesterday I was having fun, today I am just playing excellent chess, like that. Alright, so I hope you guys enjoyed this game as well as this video, and thank you for watching. Please subscribe. I'll see you in the next video. Bye!